Hi, good afternoon. I am Tuana Johnson and I'll be presenting on my research paper, Understanding Gang Formation in Schools, an exploration of administrators' perspective of the major determinants for gang affiliation in secondary schools in inner city communities in Jamaica. No, this presentation is broken down into three chapters. Chapter 1, the introduction, will be looking at the background, aims and objectives, and the research questions. Then Chapter 2, the literature review. Chapter 3, methodology section that will look at the design and methods, location, participants, and sampling and data collection. Then I will be providing the examples of interview questions asked, as well as questions asked at the focus group sessions. And last, I'll look at the ethical considerations. Now, Chapter 1, the background, aims, and objectives, as well as the research questions. As we know, gang is not unique to Jamaica. It is a global issue or problem. Whereas we see that the US, for example, accounts for 33,000 violent street gangs, motorcycle gangs, and prison gangs, which accounts for 1.4 million active members. As also, Mexico has had similar challenges with gangs, resulting from growth in the illegal drug trade. More specifically to the region and to Jamaica, locally, gang-related activities account for a substantive number of homicides in the region and in Jamaica. Jamaica accounts for an average of 1,294 homicides between the period 2010 to 2021. This is according to JCF Statistics Information Management Unit 2022, and of that total, 70% is being attributed to gangs, according to the National Intelligence Bureau of the JCF 2022. Notwithstanding that, the aims of the research is to get schools administrators' perspectives on the factors that influence gang affiliation in secondary schools in inner city communities in Jamaica, as there appears to be an increase in the formation or affiliation of students in gangs in schools, particularly in the inner city communities in Jamaica. It also aims to explore some of the latent factors and to provide a deep understanding of the perspectives of major players in the education sector on the dynamics that influence gang affiliation among high school students. As such, the objectives of the research are to understand the factors that cause students in secondary schools in Jamaica to be affiliated with gangs. As this research is an exploratory research that will set the foundation for other researchers to probe the phenomenon much deeper, so they will be able to interview the subjects, which would be some gang members and stuff, which this research will not be interviewing the students, but only to get the administrator's perspective, all right, to set the groundwork for future research in the area to understand why students are affiliated in gangs. So as such, the study will be guided by the following research questions. Question 1 is what do school administrators and others in the education sector believe to be the reason gangs appear attractive and worthwhile to secondary school students? Secondly, I want to know, what do school administrators and others in the education sector believe to be the primary reasons secondary school students choose to join a gang? As also, How do school administrators and others in the education sector believe gangs recruit secondary school students to their membership? And last but not least, how can the state address gang affiliation in secondary schools? With that in said, with that said, I will be now moving on to the literature review to look at what other authors have been saying about the phenomenon or about the issue of gang. All right, so first, when after probing the literature, I have realized that there are no agreed upon universally accepted definition of the term. In fact, the Jamaican Anti-Gang Legislation, which is the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organizations Act of 2014, defined criminal organizations as any gang, group, alliance, network, combination, or other arrangement among three or more persons, whether formally or informally affiliated or organized, or whether or not operation through one or more bodies, corporates, or other associations. And this is taken from Section 2 of the Act. Then the term gangs differ across jurisdiction, and in the Jamaican context, there are various typologies. So we have what you call the first generations of gangs, second generations, and the third generations of gangs. Now, what are these? The first generation gang is described as a traditional street gangs with a turf orientation. First generation gangs are described as loosely structured, and their engagement in crime are largely opportunistic and localized. They are referred to as corner crew. They are affiliated with political parties and are usually dormant during times of peace and mainly engage in activities to defend their communities and engage in jungle justice, particularly in cases of rape and robbery of community members. Then there is a second generation gang, which is more entrepreneurial and focused on drug trafficking and transshipment, and may overtly challenge state security and sovereignty and dominate vulnerable community. Last but not least, the third generation gang, which comprise primarily mercenary in orientation, are transnational in the scope of their activities and control ungoverned territory within a country or acquire political power in poorly governed areas. The second and third generation gangs not only dominate communities by force, but also through the social investments compensating for the inadequacies of the Jamaican welfare state. No, the JCS 2019 assessment of Jamaica's gang situation done by the National Intelligence Bureau NIB, which was the last assessment that was done, shows that there are 389 gangs operating in the country, and of this figure, 323 or 83% were considered first generation gangs, while 66 or 70 or 17% were considered second generation gangs, and they have also noted that there are no third generation gangs present in the country at the moment. The literature also revealed that gang plays a major role in Jamaica's crime problem, as they contribute heavily to serious and violent crimes in the island. Gangs are mainly concentrated within the inner city communities, which are the lower socioeconomic class, and they target the disenfranchised youths within these communities. So the average members of gangs are usually unattached male youths who are between the ages of 15 and 24 years. High, So there is a these are the age groups usually within high schools. So there are a high concentration of secondary school students in the inner cities that are affiliated with gangs. With that said, I'll now move on to the third chapter, which is the methodology section. Within this section, I will be looking at the research design and methods, as well as the location, the participants, and sampling techniques used, as well as data collection. Okay, so let's move on. Research design and methods. So, as I said, the research design is more of an this study is more of an exploratory in nature as it as the research will utilize qualitative methodology to explore school administrators and others in the education sector to get their perspective on the major determinants for gang affiliation in secondary schools in inner city communities in Jamaica. Also, the research probed primary and secondary sources, whereas semi-structured interviews were conducted with principals, deans of discipline, guidance counselors, grade coordinators from 4 secondary schools in the inner city communities in the parishes of Kingston, St. Catherine, and Clarendon, and key administrators in the Ministry of Education, as well as semi-structured focus group sessions held with 4 school resource officers from the JCF to get their perspective on on their belief of how are formulated, right? And how the issue can be fixed. So some examples of the interviews questions asked were, do you believe that gangs are in your school? So these are the questions that were asked to the principals and the grade coordinators, and so that interviews were conducted with. So question 1 was, do you believe that gangs are in your schools? Why do you believe students join gangs in schools? What do you think are the major characteristics or traits of members of a school gang? What do you believe students admire most about gang leaders? What do you believe students dislike most about gang leaders? What would you say a member of a school gang has over others? Just to get a feel as to what could be the possible reasons why students would get involved with gangs. All right, so these are some of the questions that were asked. Then some the examples of focus group session questions that were asked to the school resource officers from the JCF were, what does a school gang look like? What are the most prominent manifestations of school gang operation? What do you consider to be the single most prominent factor that attracts gang memberships in schools? And how do you believe gangs can be removed in schools? All right, so it's just to get a triangulation of their views, as well as other documents were reviewed to get a wider perspective as to why students will be affiliated with gangs in school. So with that said, the bear in mind my research has not yet been conducted, so I have no findings to present, but I'm just presenting what my research is all about. So I will be moving on to ethical considerations, which is that participants are required to give written informed consent after the nature, aim, purpose of the study, and expectations are explained to them. The rights to privacy will be protected by assuring anonymity and confidentiality, as data will be secured on a password protected thumb drive. Identity of participants and institutions will be protected as no names will be mentioned. So participants will be referred to as participant A, B, or C, and so on. And institutions will be referred to as institutions 1, 2, 3, and so on. So there will also be no deception, and participation is completely voluntary. So no one is forced, and they are aware that they have the choice. It is their choice to partake in the research, and they can choose to discontinue at any time. That said, here's my references, and that's it. Thank you very much for listening.